told you I'd be right back. It's part 2 of Al Capone. We'll do the Valentine's Day Massacre. We'll just do a little more because I've told you about it already. You think, oh, I know what she's talking about, you better watch part 1. Okay, so we'll stop it and start in. Just a little review about the Valentine's Day Massacre, 1929. They're the Italian gangs, which Capone was part of, and the Irish gangs in Chicago did war all the time. So what happened is Capone sent in his men dressed up like police officers into the trucking warehouse in the garage, and they were faking an alcohol raid. And then when they went in there, they stood everybody up against the wall. There were 7 in there, and they shot them all dead. They thought they had the leader, who, I don't see his name here, I'll get his name in a minute. Anyway, they thought they had the leader, but he was a little late. They had the witness that wouldn't talk. And, Moran, that was his last name, Moran, and he got out of it. He stayed active, Moran did, until he died penniless in Leavenworth Federal Prison in 1957. The interesting thing about this is no one was ever charged for that murder for lining 7 men up and right down the line. There was no way they could ever prove Capone did it, and none of the men could be recognized that did it. So that's what happened with the St. Valentine's Massacre, and it started off a 5-year feud that continued between these two groups. Amy, my daughter's watching, she lives in Chicago, and this massacre actually took place at 2122 North Clark Street, Chicago. I know the rest of you don't care, but if she wants to take a ride and see where that was, 2122 North Clark Street, that's where the St. Valentine's Day Massacre was. Next 2 things I'm going to tell you are really, really polar opposites. Al Capone had a kind heart. He opened a soup kitchen, one of Chicago's first soup kitchens. And if Amy's watching, it was at 935 South State Street in Chicago. 935 South State Street. Okay, and they offered, in fact, it was called the Free Soup, Coffee, and Donuts place. And that's what he offered, free soup, coffee, and donuts to all the unemployed people, because this was during the Depression. He served about 2,000 people a day. On Thanksgiving Day, before they closed, they served 5,000 people on Thanksgiving Day. Took $300 a day to run the soup kitchen, which was chump change for Capone. So, more of the Robin Hood. At the same time, many people say that this happened, he started the soup kitchen not long after the St. Valentine's Day Massacre, and he was always worried about his public image, always. He wanted to look good, he didn't like his scar, and he wanted to be known as doing good deeds. So he opened up the soup kitchen, got a lot of publicity for opening up the soup kitchen. I guess you could say that's the good. A lot of what I'm telling you is the bad. And now I'm going to tell you the ugly. Capone did not always... Okay, well, I'm getting ahead of myself just a little bit. In April 23rd, 1930, they put out the first list of the most dangerous criminals in the country. 28 men on the list, and they put him number 1, and he was public enemy number 1. So that came from the list that was put out in 1930. Now I want to tell you about another sweet, sweet side of him. But you have to bear with me just a moment. Another moment. Okay. Most of the time, Al Capone had his men, his minions, do his dirty work. But every once in a while, he took matters into his own hands because it really PO'd him. And there was this time, and I've never seen the movies, The Untouchables. I've seen the old TV show, The Untouchables. But apparently, if you watch The Untouchables with Robert De Niro or whatever it is, there's a scene in there called the baseball scene, and I guess it's pretty famous. And I've not seen the movie. I know what happened. It was based on a true story. So anyway, another Sicilian gangster, mobster gangster, Joe Alio, got some of Capone's own men from the Chicago outfit, that's what their gang was called, to try to overthrow Capone. There were 3 of them. And then one of Capone's bodyguards, Frank Rio, uncovered the plot and let Capone know about what was going on. So what Capone did is he invited the men to dinner, which was the traditional way to show hospitality before you execute someone. So the men came to dinner. When the meal was over, Capone revealed to him that he knew all about their treachery and planned to kill him. And then Capone's bodyguards tied the men to their chairs. This is really hard for me to even describe, but I'm just going to try to take my emotions out of it. And Capone stood up, grabbed a baseball bat, and slowly walked the length of the table, and he halted behind the first guest of honor. And with both hands, he slammed the bat down as hard as he could with full force. And then he said methodically would strike that same man again and again until he broke the bones in the man's shoulders and arms and chest. And then he would move on to the next man and do the same thing. When he had finished and the men had been almost disintegrated to mangled flesh and bone, he had the bodyguards fetch his revolver from the check room, and then Capone himself went through and shot each man in the back of the head. And apparently Robert De Niro played Capone, and that was a great scene, I guess, in the movie The Untouchables, which I won't be seeing. But now, aren't those 2 stories polar opposites about the soup kitchen? And there's a milk story coming up here, too, that would go with the soup kitchen. Just doesn't make sense. And then I've already covered that he was put on public enemy number 1. So, soon after this incident, and the soup kitchen closed down because the Depression was kind of getting over. He was actually finally put into prison. He was put in jail. What was it for? Killing people? Having people kill people? Paying off over half the policemen in Chicago. Half the policemen in Chicago were on Capone's payroll. Judges were. Other gangsters were. After all this, he was sent to prison. For what? Not vagrancy, not killing, tax evasion. All right. Learn something I didn't know. Supreme Court case, 1927, the United States versus Sullivan, said that anyone that sells illegal liquor during Prohibition will have to pay income taxes on it. The Supreme Court said that in 1924. I didn't know that. Yeah, how many people did that? Nobody. But that's what they got Capone on. He didn't pay those taxes. He had paid no taxes from 1925 to 1929. So what he got was 11 years in prison, $50,000 payment, plus court costs. And then the FBI kicked in another $215,000 on back taxes with the interest added to it. And Capone went to prison. First he went to a more local prison, and I can't remember where it was, but he's transferred soon to Atlanta, Georgia. And when he was in that prison, he paid off prison guards and everything else, and he had a cell that was like a hotel room. And again, everybody was on his payroll almost. But that didn't last long. They transferred him to Atlanta, Georgia, to the U.S. Penitentiary there. He's still in Atlanta, Georgia, paid people off, and it wasn't too bad of accommodations. But then the people in Atlanta found out that he was paying off a lot of prison people to be nice to him, and they didn't like that. And then came the changing moment of his life. He was sent to Alcatraz, which had just opened out in California off the coast that nobody escapes from, and all that kind of stuff. Let me, before we go to Alcatraz, fill in two things, okay? I'll fill in those two things in there. Actually, I've got three things I want to fill in. So anyway, they sent him to Alcatraz. And when he got to Alcatraz, life wasn't like he knew it. They didn't care a piddly squat in a bird bowl who he was. He tried to cut in line at the dinner line one time, and the guy that he tried to cut in line for pulled the scissors out, put it up to his neck. And I'm paraphrasing here because I didn't write the exact quote down. And when he did, Capone said, do you know who I am? And the guy responded, and I don't remember, I didn't write the exact quote down, but something about, I know who you are, you grease head. And he said, I know who you are, and if you cut this line again, I will have known who you are, something. Anyway, he threatened him big time with his scissors, called him a greasehead, and used the word effing in his second comment to him, that he would be past due. So you would think that Capone would learn that, but he didn't. He cut in line again, like getting a haircut, and the guy cut in front of grabbed the barber's clippers and stabbed him, and he had to go to the infirmary and get taken care of there. He just didn't listen very well. At the same time, as I tell you, he didn't listen very well. He had pretty good behavior, good enough behavior that he could get onto the Alcatraz Prisoner Ban, and it was called the Rock Islanders, and they gave Sunday afternoon concerts. And so that was the prison actually opened in 1934, and he played the banjo on Sundays in the Rock Islanders band. Comes another fascinating part of the story. When Capone got to Chicago, he visited quite frequently prostitution houses. And it is thought that maybe that's where he got syphilis. And this was, when he first got to Chicago, he was in his 20s, and he never was treated for syphilis. And if you don't treat for syphilis, it's going to sit there and grow, and you're going to be in big trouble when you get older. Well, by the time he got to Alcatraz, the syphilis was starting to get full-blown into what they call brain syphilitis. The people in Alcatraz actually tried to treat that, you won't believe how, but by giving him shots of malaria. They thought they could treat the syphilis. Remember, penicillin wasn't quite there yet. That just made Capone worse. And he got so sick, it affected his brain, and he got to where he had the mental capacity of about a 13, 14-year-old kid while he was at Alcatraz. So they transferred him to a hospital in California, a prison hospital called called Terminal Island because of the syphilis, and this was in 1930. Excuse me, it's in 39. In 38, they started seeing all kinds of weird behavior out of Alcatraz and childlike behavior and everything. So they transferred him in 1939 to Los Angeles Prison Hospital called the Terminal Island. And that was in early 1939. By November 1939, they transferred him to Pennsylvania. And then, in Pennsylvania. And then on the 16th, in 1939 of November, they released him from that prison. I guess he'd served his time. He was treated at that time with the brand new drug penicillin. And the brand new drug penicillin didn't help with him. He just kept getting worse. He went back to Florida, and he died in 1947, January 1947. He was 48 years old, and he died of heart failure, and his condition just kept worsening. I guess I read one thing, but I didn't write down to tell you. When he got to Florida, he spent crazy years there. He thought that one mobster that ran the Irish group was coming after him every day. He thought communists were coming after him. He thought everybody was going to come down and get him, and he probably didn't go to town any at that time. And then his mental capacity just kept going lower and lower to where it got down to about a 12-year-old by the time he had heart failure. So it is kind of sad in a way. And that's the end of him, except for the 3 things or so that I want to tell you that I thought were amazingly interesting. I want to do the milk thing last. So, just interesting trivia. There was a Canadian town, a small town in Canada, not too far across the line in Saskatchewan. And it was called Moose Jaw. Never been to Moose Jaw. And Moose Jaw needed people. They needed tourists. They needed people to come to their town. So, and I am going to read about Moose Jaw, because apparently there were tunnels all under Moose Jaw, and I don't know why, but they call them the Moose Jaw Tunnels. And they put out that during Prohibition, that Capone ran his operation from up there at Moose Jaw, covert, going in the tunnels and under the tunnels. And that's where he ran his operation from. Well, everybody wanted to go see where Al Capone used the tunnels to run his operation. The thing is, the Border Patrol, he said he never crossed up at Moose Jaw in his life, that Al Capone was not there. It was just a complete fabricated story, which went along great with all those tunnels, which I'll tell you sometime when I found out about those. My friend Brenda, who loves history, why don't you look up Moose Jaw, Canada, Saskatchewan, and see why all those tunnels are under there, because I don't know. Maybe gold mining, I might guess. I don't know. Silver, who knows. So I thought that was very, very, very interesting. Let me check real fast before I go with the milk story. I actually made notes on this because I was so fascinated. I thought, I will never remember to tell everybody all this stuff. So I made notes. Oh, here it is. 2 more interesting stories. The last one is the milk story. Well, 3 more interesting stories. One is a lot. I've never seen the movie The Untouchables, but I watch the old TV show all the time. If anybody's out there and trying to get sexy here. If anybody watched the old TV show, Elliot Ness, and that was a true person. That show was based on a true person. And, of course, Capone owned half the cops in Chicago. Well, he offered Elliot Ness, if he would look the other way when Capone and his men are doing their stuff, he would put $2,000 every Monday Elliot Ness would find it on his desk. $2,000 a month. In today's money, that would be like putting $16,812 on somebody's desk every Monday, to just look the other way. You know, Elliot Ness, if you ever watch the show, The Untouchables, the old one, I don't know about the movie, he doesn't do that. He refuses. And one kind of interesting thing, it said he died at age 54, Elliot Ness did, almost completely broke. And if he would have not been a really good person, he would have died, well, maybe he would have died a rich man, I don't know. And when I was reading that, it says 1/3 of the $105 million he made in 1 year was paid out in bribes to judges and gangsters and cops, and half the cops in Chicago. But that's why he was never charged for his mob crimes, his gangster crimes. It was the tax evasion. Okay, next interesting thing. There's a famous jazz musician named Fats Waller, Waller. Well, his men kidnapped him at gunpoint. He walked out of somewhere one night and they shoved the gun in his face and threw him in a car. Didn't know where he was going. And what they wanted to do is surprise Al Capone for his birthday with Fats Waller singing and playing whatever jazz music he played. That was in 1926 in Chicago. And it said when they finally took, it was 3 days they kept him. When they finally took him home, it said he was drunk and tired, but he had earned thousands and thousands of dollars because they tipped him $100 a song for every song he played. So it probably wasn't too bad of a kidnapping for Fats Waller. Then the other two things, well, I'm down to one thing, and that's the milk thing. Now, if anyone knows this out there, then you need to get a little star for trivia. Brenda, are you listening? One of Capone's relatives got sick on spoiled milk in Chicago. And this is before there were any dates stamped on milk. The milk was delivered to you. There was no expiration date. Guess you just smelled or took a chance, whatever. And they got really, really sick. Well, that made him really, really mad. And so he went and pressed the case, yeah, the big gangster did, for protecting the children in Chicago and having an expiration date on the milk. And they listened to him, and they did it. It's because of Al Capone that expiration dates started being stamped on milk containers. Of course, it was bottles back then. It wasn't cartons, but that's what happened. And it was going to just work out great for him because the bottles they used to bootleg were produced by, I'm trying to find out where that is. They were produced by a certain facility for alcohol, for prohibition. Well, they were controlled by Capone. So Capone thought, hey, I can, because he got involved in the milk industry. First thing he tried to do is he tried to find out if he could get Wisconsin milk for cheaper than he could get Illinois milk or wherever that milk came from. I guess it came from Illinois. And he couldn't. So then it says he joined the milk industry after that, and it's going to work out for him because he would make money because now that his company that bottled for alcohol was going to bottle for milk. He still had one problem left. Only the union milkmen could deliver milk to the homes in Chicago. That's it. Now, how's he going to work on that? This is what he did. He kidnapped the president of the union. And they put out a $50,000 ransom, which is an awful lot back then, to release the president of the union, the milk union. So they finally released him, and he used that $50,000 to buy a dairy. Capone did. And this fascinated me because I collect milk bottles. Anybody ever seen a milk bottle from the Meadowmore, Meadowmoor, the Meadowmore dairies up around Illinois somewhere? You best be getting that because that was Al Capone's milk company. Then what he did is he monopolized the milk market. And once he monopolized the milk market, then he could pretty much make any rule he wanted for the milk. He didn't have to use union milkmen anymore. And that's the story, and I'm sticking to it. I will tell you that about 3 months after he bought this company and monopolized the milk market, the Meadowmore Dairies, he was arrested for tax evasion and he went to prison. So that little sweet deal didn't last for too long with Al Capone. And that's the end of that. Okay? I usually post these on Facebook, and when I do, I'm going to put in a website where you can go and you can listen to a short video that tells you a little bit of this. It might, well, it's not going to be more interesting to me at all, but you might learn just a little bit more. And I'm going to put this song on that I've been playing for you, and the name of the song is Al Capone. How cool is that?
The police did finally book him on a bleak and fateful day. Not for murder, but for taxes that he didn't want to pay. The streets may have been safer, and crime may have been tamed, but
He's a little bit different.